Hi everyone, it's Wendy and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm just trying to get sorted for the day now. Earlier today I finished off the day 15 ACT, and that was the last little bit of paper that I had. So I decided that instead of my original plan was actually to move on to these little sample booklets that I had, and that is the Stonehenge watercolour paper, and that is a lovely paper to work with, but because of its size it's a little bit bigger. My OCD kicks in a little bit, so I decided to go for the same sized paper, and I cut that down to, it ended up being 2 inches wide and 3.5 long, so they will then match what I already have. So I've cut them out using my Arches watercolour paper. There's different weights there, but I've chosen the 300 GSM, so that'll be nice and thick. Also, I'll start doing over the next few days actually using watercolour with these little ones. As you know, it's one of my favourite mediums, but I did have some leftover pieces, and over the last few days I've also been doing some tags for my art journals. So I decided that before I start off on the ACTs again tomorrow with my little leftover pieces here this afternoon, I'm just going to create some little embellishments that I can then add to the journal using a bit of watercolour, inks, other mixed medias as well. So for this next little bit, I have to start thinking about what I'm going to do. I'll pause for a moment and I'll get everything set up to start playing with these. Okay, just starting with a little bit of washi tape, just to give myself a bit of a border around this little tag. And I've just put it on a wooden pallet, just so if I do need to turn it around, it's a little bit easier to do so. So just eyeballing that at the moment. Get stuck with, sorry, this one hand that, yes, it does look awkward. It feels as awkward as. Okay. So what I did want to start with, I have got my little ink there, and I've got a couple of new stamps. So these are just small ones. I just thought with these I might just make an image so it's similar to a postage stamp. So the tape will come in handy, it'll just block out the areas. I use a lot of clear stamps these days, so it's actually easier to see through where the image lines up. It's pushing down nice and firmly. So I'm just going to do a couple of different layers, and then once that's dry I'm going to add just some watercolour to the background. Okay, I think I'm reasonably happy with that. So I'm just going to dry this off. Okay, so I've just got my little watercolour palette. They're a mix of the Daily Brownie and also this is from Uniquely Creative. So you can see there that it's a well used palette. So I've just got my water, just putting a bit into those until I use a lot of greens and blues. Now I do like using pan watercolours, but I also like using watercolours from the tubes. The great thing with watercolours I do have found is that even when it's dry, such as I like these colours, if I'm using them regularly I won't wipe them off. I just let them dry, and then once I've got the water there I can actually reactivate again. So these were all purchased as pans. I've got my large Winsor & Newton set that I used on last year's 100-day project. I've put them in pans, but they were actually tubed paints to start with. I put them in the pans. I find it easier just to transport around. So I'm just going to dabble with a couple of different greens. Maybe a little bit of turquoise too in the mix. So initially I've put this as a wet on dry, and as we're building up water there, I'm just leaving a couple of blank spots. I like a little bit of white still on my images. So now that it's a bit wet, I'm just adding heavier saturation of colour in over the top. So if there's a little bit of bleeding under the tape, which I think there is, I don't think I've sealed one side very well. That's okay. So I'm just going to do a few extra things on the side. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and dry this off. Okay, now some of you may have missed it, but I do have a tendency to like gold. Now this is a few years old now. I've been using it as just on the edgings, but I'm just going to add just a little light leaf of gold over the top of this before I take the tape down. I can't remember where I got these ones from. I think it was from a little craft store in Kingaroy, which is in southeast Queensland, sorry. So I'm just pressing down on there. It doesn't have to come out too much. I just want just that touch of gold in there. So yeah, just a little bit of glimmer coming through there at the top of that one. So when we do some more ATCs, I'm going to bring in some gold into the watercolours. Actually, I thought it was going to leak on that side, but that's coming out okay. Okay, and just a little tag there. Now I'm just going to find a trimmer that I want. I'm going to take off the edges to make it look more like a stamp. Okay, so I've just got these she is. Just taking those edges off. I'm just going to neaten these up a little bit. Getting very excited. Next week, next Thursday, is the day that hopefully, well, it will come off. This cast will come off. Hopefully scans and everything show that it's healing well. It doesn't have to go back on, and I can return to a normal way of living. I have found it extremely vexing to have this cast on. Even though I'm right-handed, there are a lot of things that I do with my left hand that I really had no idea that I used to do. And it's made it quite difficult at times just to do things. So I'm going to just put a little edge around here, just freehand. It's not going to be ruled, just a little bit messy. I'm not pressing very heavy, so there's going to be a couple little gaps there left. I might come around just on the edge of there as well. So I'm glad I've actually chosen this watercolour paper to continue with my ATCs. I was having so much trouble with the previous paper that it would actually pill with any watercolour. Hence I did a lot more of gouache with the acrylics on it, and even just the Deco Art acrylics work quite nicely on there. Even though it says it was a watercolour, it just really did not work for watercolour. I think when you're starting out, that was the biggest problem when I first tried doing watercolour, was that you get very affordable paper, watercolours, etc. But when you can actually use cheaper watercolour paints quite effectively, and they can produce some reasonable results, but it all comes down to the quality of the watercolour paper. Since I started using high-end quality water paper, I noticed a significant difference in my work. So I'm actually reasonably happy with that. Just a quick and simple little embellishment that I can actually add then to some journal pages. So I'm just building up a whole lot of these at the present stage. I want to get in and do some more journaling, but I just want to get a collection of little embellishments first before I really start playing again with my journals. I do a lot of painting in my art journals, but I just want to get back into using a few more embellishments, art tags and things like that into my art journals. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I'm just going to get set up and I'll create another little one. Okay, so I've put another one of these little cards down. I'll put you through the torture of watching me actually put that one down again. It's a slow process with one not so functioning hand. Now these new little stamps that I am using, wasn't quite sure of the actual quality of them, but they were cheap at half the price, so you can never have too many stamps. Just going to take that edge off the side there. Okay, so if it goes over again, that's fine. If you can hear, there's some funny little noises going on in the background. Little old Isa is having a dream. Maybe chasing rabbits across the field. She's a big dreamer. Often runs along the way as she's sleeping. My poor baby. She's not the smartest little thing in the world, but she'd have to be the kindest, biggest, hardest rub hound you could come across. Okay, really happy with those stamps. I'm just using a baby wipe to take off any excess ink. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a moment and I'm going to just come in with my heat gun and just dry that off. So with this one now, I'm going to add a little bit more definition. Oh, sorry, just missed that first bit. So I'm going to focus in on the leaves this time because they're a little bit more defined, and then create a background. So I'll just speed up this next little process. Okie dokie. So just put those colours down just pretty loosely. If I was doing a proper watercolour, I'd spend a lot more time and effort. I allowed some of that green to just bleed into the blue. That's quite a cute card. So once again, I'm going to trim these edges. These little shears. Okay, push that out of the way. So I'm just going to put just another little border around the edge of this one. So I've taped down another bit of paper with the washi tape. Now, I think I don't think I've talked about it before, is that you can see with this one it's slightly rough on one side and it's smooth on the other side. So when I actually sometimes use the watercolour paper to actually make a journal, I'll actually use both sides, which is quite okay. But in this case, the side that you paint on generally is the rougher side. You can get watercolour paper that is hot pressed and it's very smooth. Cold press is rougher, and then you've got different grades of roughness. You can get a smoothish sort of watercolour paper in the cold press, which this one is, and then you can get a quite heavy one as well, which sometimes I find the heavier ones are great for landscapes, something with not as fine details. Hot press are quite good for portraits when you're looking for something nice and smooth, and the paper is lovely and silky. So just another new stamp. So not a lot of thought going into these little ones today. Just want to create some simple images to make these into little stamps. Now I do have other ink pads, and you can use any ink. Archival ink is great because then once it dries it's not going to bleed. So that's just getting a little bit light there now. I think I might add some darker ones. Sorry for my arm stretching across there. So this is another Ranger archival ink. You could possibly use coloured inks on this as well. Pressing down nice and firmly. It gives the images there now of something in the background and something in the foreground. Okay. So I'm just going to use my heat gun again and just dry that off. So that's down. Just got those watercolours still. Just coming over the top. So this is just wet going onto the dry. You could put a wet on wet. And eventually I just will add additional changes in the pigment. And just build that up a bit more. As I said before, I'm going to add, sorry, not add, but leave, there's some little white just popping through. I do like having a little bit of negative space. adds a little bit of interest at times. Now I put a big blob of green down there and it jumped out too much at me. So, and this is the other advantage of having good quality paper. All I've done is added a bit more water over the top, and I've just spread that out, and any excess green that I don't want I can just simply mop up. So I might add just a bit more turquoise into that. Just coming down from the top. I'm just going to dry that off. It's nice and dry there at the moment. Now, I want a bit more oomph to this little one. So I have got, this is my Uniball, the Signo, and in the gold. So I just want to add just a bit of gold over the top here and there. Just to give it a little bit of bling. You could, if you wanted to, add some little diamantes to lift that embellishment. Occasionally I like using those on tags. Have just always cautious of how much I use, so it doesn't create an image when I'm, or create a problem when I'm actually creating an image on another page. Sometimes you get little lumps that makes it harder if I'm actually painting or drawing in the art journal. So just taking those off. You see that one bled a little bit, but that's okay. Okay, I'm going to trim back these edges. Now, I'm actually sweating today while I'm doing my art. It's a lovely humid day. Temperature's not too bad, but the humidity is starting to build up again. It had some rain, but we're still predicting a bit more. Need amples more. There's many places within Queensland still that are still drought declared. Several towns, including a little town where my father-in-law grew up in Clifton in Queensland. Their conditions are so bad that they're actually still having to ship water in, similar to another reasonable sized town called Stanthorpe. So, while many places seem to have had a lot of water, they're still very much on big restrictions. And we take for granted that you turn on the tap and you have an endless supply of water, but at the present stage, yeah, the towns are basically having to cart water in from other areas, so there's enough water for the actual town for general consumption. Okay, so I'm going to speed up this next process, and just by adding those edges again. Okay, so you can see just a little bit of gold there. Just that little, just so you can see just those little hints of white coming through. Just gives a little bit more dimension to that image. Okay, so I've taped off that next one. So this is number 4. Sometimes I think I am as blind as a bat. I couldn't see from looking. It took me about 2 minutes to find the washi tape. The washi tape was sitting just here. So that's all taped down. I hope other people have those moments. Just covering that with a nice amount of ink. This one's got a few more finer details. I'm going to try and center this on the image block. And the other 4 or other 3 cards have got very much green dominated on them, and I thought this one we might add maybe some browns, some earthy tones on this one with a splash of colour. Okay, mostly happy with that. So the details don't have to come out super fine with these little ones. So I'm just going to dry this off. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to use just a few different colours. That's okay, I'm going to have them with a little bit of the green there. Let's make sure those edges are down a little bit better. A bit more brown, I think. So I'm not going to be overly concerned about the flowers there. I am thinking about coming in with some white and making these some cute little white daisies. Just bringing that in. Once again, just a few white spots there. I'm going to dry this off well, and then I'll come in with some gel pen. Okay, so that is my hybrid gel pen. That has some nice white on it. So I'm not going to be overly fussy. Sometimes I like it when it's just a little bit messy, not overly neat. I'll come back in and add more dimension. Might actually change over to get it to pop a little bit more. So if I can. So that one was a bit thick, so I'm just going to come back in with my Posca pen. This one's a bit thinner. And it does give just a bit more coverage there. have a look at what we want to do for those centres. Make those a bit darker. Going to come in with just a little bit of dark brown, just into the center, and I might just add just a touch of green. Those leaves. Not a huge amount. Once again, not a huge amount of detail, just a little bit of colour here and there. Pretty happy with the way that these have been turning out. So just another little simple one. I'm just going to dry this off and take the tape off and come back and we'll finish off the edge. I'm pretty happy with the way these have turned out this afternoon. There'll be some cute little embellishments to put into my art journal. So just with a little bit of scrap paper off the watercolour paper, I'm just creating those. I think just those shears and just a little bit of messy ink work just helps finish those ones off. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.